ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge in Allah from shaitan, the rejected one. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. I greet you with the universal greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are looking at Surah 4, verse 11 and 12, and we will be discussing the law of inheritance as laid out in the Quran. To begin with, in verse 11, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Allah does direct you as regards your children's inheritance. To the male, a portion equal to that of two females. If only daughters, two or more, their share is 2/3 of the inheritance. If only one, a share is a half. For parents, a sixth share of the inheritance to each, if the deceased left children. If no children and the parents are the only heirs, the mother has a third. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother has a sixth. The distribution in all cases is after the payment of legacies and debts. You know not whether your children or your parents or your children. You know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are the settled portions ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Then the verse 12 says, in what your wives leave, your share is a half, if they leave no child. But if they leave a child, you get a fourth, after payment of legacies and debts. In what you leave, their share is a fourth, if you leave no child. But if you leave a child, they get an eighth, after payment of legacies and debts. If the man or woman whose inheritance is in question has left neither ascendants nor descendants, but has left a brother or sister, each one of the two get a sixth. But if more than two, their share is a third, after payment of legacies and debts, so that no loss is caused to anyone. Thus it is ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, most forbearing. Those are the limits set by Allah. Those who obey Allah and His Rasul will be admitted to gardens with rivers flowing beneath, to abide therein forever, and that will be the supreme achievement. But those who disobey Allah and His Rasul and transgress His limits will be admitted to a fire to abide therein, and they shall have a humiliating punishment. So this is section 2 of Surah 4 verse 11, 12, 13 and 14, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights the different fractions relating to inheritance. So if we begin at verse 11, Allah says, before I speak about verse 11, we spoke in our last clip about verse 7 to say that from what is left by parents and those that related, there is a share for men and a share for women, whether small or large, a determined share. But if at the time of division other relatives or orphans are present, feed them out of the property and speak to them words of kindness and justice. And then, this verse shows that it is important to give the parents and the children a share. And if others are present, you should also feed them from the inheritance or the estate. And verse 9 says, let those disposing of an estate have the same fear in their minds as if they were disposing their own estate. So that's important factors to take into account when discussing verse 11. So verse 11, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allah thus directs you as regarding your children's inheritance. To the male, a portion equal to that of two females. So if you have children, if you have one son and one daughter, for example, then if you break the shares up, the son will get two portions and the daughter will get one portion. But we will talk about how to split it specifically later on. So the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives two shares to a man and one share to a woman is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah 4 verse 34 that the man is a maintainer of woman. Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala nisa. So he has the financial responsibility of looking after the wife and the females in the society. But the woman, on the other hand, we discussed it in our last clip, says that has whatever wealth she gets, for example, in the dowry, her wealth is her own. So the reason that a man is given two shares and a woman is given one share is because the man has a greater financial responsibility of looking after himself and the wife and the females in the society, whereas the woman has to just look after herself. Then the verse says, if only daughters, two or more, their share is two-thirds of the inheritance. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives many varieties in this verse, and we won't go through all the varieties, because each one's case is specific and unique to themselves. And then Allah says, if only one, her share is a half. So if you only have daughters, then there is a specific requirement. For parents, a sixth share of the inheritance to each. So from the inheritance that you have, you must give the parents 1/6 each. So your father is alive and your mother is alive, you give the father 1/6, and your mother will get 1/6 of your inheritance. If no children and the parents are the only heirs, the mother has a third. So if you have no children, then the mother will get a third. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother has 1/6. The distribution in all cases is after the payment of legacies and debts. And this is the important part. Allah says, the distribution in all cases is after the payment of legacies and debts. Min ba'di wasiyatin yusi biha aw dayn. So the portions must be broken up as stipulated above and afterwards. After min ba'di wasiyatin, after the wasiya aw dayn, or the debt. So first the person must pay his debt, and then he must give the wasiya, and after he gives the wasiya and the debt, then he must do the portions ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We will look at one example just now. You know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are settled portions ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. The question comes about the part of the verse that says, Min ba'di wasiyatin yusi biha aw dayn. The payment is, the distribution is after the payment of the wasiya, which is translated as legacies. Others translate it as the will. The payment of these portions is after the debt has been paid and after the personal will of the deceased has been carried out. So just to put it in perspective, first, when a person dies, the executor who is in charge of distributing the wealth should first see what debt the deceased had, and from the estate, from his wealth, should first pay the debt. Secondly, after that, the person must give the wasiya. Now, the wasiya is the personal stipulation of the deceased. Now, the personal stipulation is further explained, for example, in Surah 2, verse 240. If we just go to Surah 2, verse 240, we'll read. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Those of you who die and leave widows should bequeath for their widows wasiyatan li azwajihinna mata'an, for their widows a year's maintenance and residence. But if they leave the residence, there is no blame on you for what they do with themselves, provided it is reasonable and Allah is exalted in power, the wise. So part of that wasiyah is Surah 2 verse 240. So first, the debts are paid. Secondly, the deceased, if he's the man, then he should give his wife a year's maintenance and residence as part of this wasiyah that is explained in this verse. And others go on to explain that you can also have personal stipulations in your will. Maybe you've got a son that's got who's sick, or or he needs care, or maybe one of your children are crippled, or also maybe your wife was your partner in your business, or you may have had a joint property with somebody, or a joint partnership in certain things. Then those things must be stipulated and carried out first. So for example, you went to work and your wife was sitting at home, but because your wife sat at home and she looked after the children and nurtured and brought them up correctly and maybe sacrificed her career, then you should also stipulate in this personal will that you should give her a certain share of your inheritance. So that's very important, that first you give the debt, and then you give your personal situation, giving the wife a year's maintenance and residence, and giving her a certain share because she was your partner at home, for example. And maybe you've got certain personal conditions that you stipulate, so you sort those things out as well. So after those are part of when the personal will has been carried out, then the third part of the will comes into play, which is the shares. Then you, for example, you got parents, you give your parents a sixth share of the inheritance, and you've got children, you got a son and a daughter. The son gets 2/3, and the daughter gets 1/3 after from the remainder of the inheritance. So if you take an example, for example, a person has 1 million rand, and then what you should do first is take out the debt. So the debt is, say, for example, 200,000 rand. So the 1 million rand minus 200,000 rand will give you 800,000 rand. And then from there we see that Surah 2 verse 240 says the man should give a wasiya to his wife, a year's maintenance and residence. And in this we see that you can also have a personal will where you can see your own situation, where you decide that, where you realize that somebody is crippled in your family, among your children, or you may have a certain close friend of yours that you want to give something, whatever the case may be. So say that amount comes to another 200,000 rand. So from the 1 million rand, you minus 200,000 rand for your debt, and then you minus another 200,000 rand for your wife's maintenance and residence and the personal stipulation of your will. So that now takes out another 200,000 rand. So you're left with now 600,000 rand. So from the 600,000 rand that's left, you will have to break down the portions according to Surah 4 verse 11 that says to parents a sixth share of the inheritance to each. So you'll give 1/6 of the 600,000 rand to your father, which is 100,000 rand, and you'll give 1/6 of the inheritance, which is the 600,000 rand, to your mother, which is another 100,000 rand. Then you'll have to give the wife 1/8 of the inheritance. So from that 600,000 rand that you have, if you take 1/8 from there, it gives 50,000 rand. So the 600,000 rand that you have, 100,000 rand was for the father, which makes it 500,000 rand. 100,000 rand was for the mother, which made it 400,000 rand, and 50,000 rand was for the wife, which made it 350,000 rand. So the 350,000 rand that's left must be shared among your children. So you will see that if you break it up 2:1, the daughter will get 116,000 rand 666 rand 67 cents, and the son will get 233,333 rand 33 cents. So by doing that, we see that the 1 million rand has been distributed according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commandments. First, you gave out the debt, which was the 200,000 rand. Then you gave the personal wasiya, which was the wife's maintenance and residence, and that was your personal requirements that you placed into the world, was another 200,000 rand. 1/6 for the father, 100,000 rand. 1/6 for the mother, another 100,000 rand. 1/8 for the wife, another 50,000 rand. And then the 350,000 rand was split between the son and the daughter, 2:1. So that is a simple example of how the world is broken up from the Quranic law of inheritance. So that is important, that is how you should distribute your will, so that you do not leave any of the children out, and your parents are given a share, and you also take into account your personal situation, where you can have a stipulation as part of the personal will, where you also gave your wife a year's maintenance and residence before you broke up the will. That was part of the 200,000 rand that we mentioned earlier. Then further, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that during this world, if you have uh, a dispute around the world and somebody contests that the world has not been fair, they have the right to contest the world. And if you look at Surah 5 verse 109, we'll read, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O you believe, when death approaches any of you, take witnesses among yourselves when making bequest, two just men of your own brotherhood, or others from outside, if you are journeying through the earth, and the chance of death befalls you thus. If you doubt the truth, detain them both after prayer, and let them both swear by Allah, we wish not in this for any worldly gain, even though the beneficiary be our near relation. We shall hide not the evidence before Allah. If we do, then behold, the sin is upon us. But if it gets known that these two were guilty of perjury, so if you have fear that there was some injustice in the establishment of this world, let two others stand forth in their place, nearest in kin from among those who claim a lawful right. Let them swear by Allah, we affirm that our witness is truer than those two, and that we have not transgressed beyond the truth. If you did, behold, the wrong be upon us. That is most suitable that you may give the evidence in its true nature and shape, or else they would fear that other oaths would be taken after their oaths. But fear Allah and listen to His counsel, for Allah guides not a rebellious people. So this verse is important to say that if any of the heirs feel that there's injustice, then they have the right to appeal and contest the will so that justice is set up. But what is important when looking at these verses relating to the will is that it is important that we have goodwill, we have a great understanding among us to say that we we look after the wishes of the deceased, and if he is a muttaqi person, he will distribute it in the right way. The will, the inheritance is not an opportunity for some to usurp the wealth of the others, as is mentioned in Surah 5, verse 109 and 110 that we spoke about, where some perjury can take place. Or we've also mentioned in our last club that Allah says, let those disposing of an estate have the same fear in their minds as they would have of their own if they had left a helpless family behind. So the believers have the God consciousness, and they do not look at usurping the wealth of others. There is no greed, there is no need for jealousy, there's no need to say that somebody else has been given more to you, or fight over the personal wealth because the person stipulated something in that was here before the rest of the remainder of the estate has been wound up by those the shares mentioned in verse 4, 11, and 12. So what is important is that we have goodwill and we have an understanding, and we come to a just amicable settlement in the inheritance. And what's important for the person that's making the will, the testator, is that they should make sure that they be fair and just and write down the will firstly, and secondly write it down with fairness and sign it in the presence of witnesses, so that when they pass on, that there is no fighting and injustice and animosity and division among the heirs that are left behind. So this is the inheritance that is been mentioned for verse 4, 11, and Surah 4, verse 11 and 12, where Allah mentions the heirs of the inheritance. And Allah says in verse 13, Tilka hudud Allah, these are the limits set by Allah. So it's important to realize that these are the limits set by Allah. This is Allah's stipulation. Those who obey Allah and His Rasul will be admitted to gardens with rivers flowing beneath. So it is important to make a fair and just will and write it down so that you don't have injustice. To those therein, to abide therein forever. And that will be the supreme achievement. Another verse that we should look at here, because some people they have the case where, as mentioned in verse 12, that says, if a man has and a woman, if a man or woman whose inheritance is in question has left neither ascendants or descendants, then we should look at the last verse of Surah 4, verse 176. And we read, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they ask thee for a legal decision. Say, Allah directs thus about those who leave no descendants or ascendants. As is, if it is a man that dies leaving a sister but no child, she shall have half the inheritance. If such a deceased was a woman who left no child, a brother takes her inheritance. If there are two sisters, they shall have 2/3 of the inheritance between them. If they are brothers and sisters, they share, the male having twice the share of the female. Thus does Allah make clear to you His law, lest you err, and Allah has knowledge of all things. So what is important is to realize that when making a will, we should look at all the verses relating to the will. Surah 4, verse 11 and 12. Surah 2, verse 180, that says you should make a will. Surah 2, verse 240, which mentions that you should bequeath or make a will that your wife gets a year's maintenance and residence before the will is um, executed. And if there's and then Surah 5, verse 109 to 111, that says that if there is perjury, or if you have the right to basically contest the world if you see injustice, that is mentioned. And Surah 4, verse 176 here shows that if you have left neither parents nor children, how you should break up your will. So what is important is to look at all the verses in the Quran together, and from the verses do what is best and just, As Surah 4 verse 7 and 8 says, that if at the time of division others are present, don't feel that it is he's taking my share, I want it for myself, I'll be getting less. Don't have that greed and animosity and jealousy and hatred. Rather say, feed them out of the world, give them something, because they were possibly near, and they are there when you are near to the deceased, and they are there at the time of the distribution of the world. So you should give them from that as well. So there's goodness, and there's no animosity, jealousy, and hatred among the heirs. It is the world that is executed according to what the deceased have left behind, and we should accept it at its best. And if there is an injustice in the world, you have the right to contest. And if you're not successful in the contest, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge on the day of judgment as to what is right and wrong. And it is not an excuse to create animosity and disunity among family members. So we'll stop there today regarding inheritance. I thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر